And then he thought, what in the world am I doing? I mean, it looks like nobody lives here, but if I do knock at the door and somebody answers, what am I supposed to say? Hi, I'm looking for a girl who disappeared from the back of my car last night. They're going to think I'm nuts. He was so lost in thought he didn't even hear the sound of the car pulling up on the road behind him and stopping. The first thing he heard was an old man's voice saying, "Son, what you doing here?" He turned around and there was a battered red pickup truck with an old man peering at him out the driver's window. Randy said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm looking for someone who lives here." "Lives here," said the old man. "Ain't nobody lives here." No, you don't understand, sir. I met a girl last night. She told me she lives here." And for the first time, the old man smiled. He said, "If a girl told you that, she was trying to get rid of you, son." Ain't nobody's lived here for 19 years since the Robinsons moved out. Mrs. Robinson, she had kin out east, Pennsylvania, I think. Moved out there about a year after they lost their girl. "Their girl, sir?" said Randy. "Sure. Emily was her name. Sweet thing, just 17. On her way to a high school dance with her boyfriend driving too fast in the rain. He flipped the car and she was thrown clear. But she died there by the side of the road." "Are you sure, sir?" "Sure, of course I'm sure. I've lived up the road all my life. I was there at her funeral. I was there when they put her in the ground. At Ross Cemetery, not a mile from here. Killed by her boyfriend out on Reeder Road." 10 minutes later, with his head still spinning, Randy got into his car and started to drive. Didn't even know where he was driving to. But through that crisp, beautiful Saturday morning, October light, when the gates of Ross Cemetery came up now on the left, something made him want to turn in. He parked in the gravel drive and got out, walked around the cemetery for 15 minutes, didn't find what he was looking for. He was almost relieved. He was almost back in his car, his hand almost there in the latch, when he saw it. A flash of color among the autumn leaves, something that didn't belong. It was a small tombstone in one corner that said simply Emily with 2 sets of dates. The date of her birth and the date of her death. If Randy'd been looking, he might have seen that the second date, the date of her death, was 20 years exactly from the night he picked up the stranger on Reeder Road. But he wasn't looking at the dates. He wasn't looking at the name or even the tombstone. He was looking at a Griffith Letterman's jacket folded up neatly, lying on the gentle mound of that grave. Thank you, guys. My brother told me that story, and the weird thing is, I believed him. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have believed my brother if he told me that Sunday came after Saturday, but there was something about the magic of that night and that firelight, something about the magic of being 12 that I believed every single word. I gotta tell you, I don't think I slept that night. But when the morning came and my friends had left, somehow the magic of ghost stories was still wrapped around me, and I don't think it has ever left. So that's really what my books are. My books are my attempt at a campfire, where I am so incredibly privileged to be able to share the stories with you. I never intended to write one book, much less 6. But it kind of happened like so many good things in my life in a serendipitous way. I went to Valparaiso University, and then I got my master's degree from Duke University. And when I was down at Duke, I went into a bookstore in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. There's some other school in that town. I don't know what it is. But anyway. And I saw that they had 4 books on North Carolina ghost stories. Well, you know what? I was a grad student. I didn't have any money. I think I took my meal money for the day, and I bought those books, and I got back to my house, man. I was like just being 12 years old again. I devoured these books. And I thought to myself, I couldn't wait to get back to Indiana and pick up the book on Indiana ghost stories. Well, 3 years later, I got my master's degree from Duke. A week after I graduated, I got married. A week later, I moved to Portland, Indiana, northeast of Muncie, if anybody's ever heard of that. My very first week there, I went into a bookstore in Muncie. And I said to the lady there in the store, "Hey, can you show me the book on Indiana ghost stories?" She said, "There isn't one." I said, "There isn't?" She said, "No, but I remember Indiana University, the folklore department in Bloomington, advertised a couple years ago for all across the state newspapers saying they wanted people to send in ghost stories. They were going to make a ghost story book. They never did it. I said, I wonder why not. She said, I don't know. Well, the people who know me best say that I am braver than I am smart, and I'm not terribly brave or smart. But I did something brash that day. I went home and I called up, turned out to be the dean of the folklore department. Found out later she was a very internationally known expert in folklore, but I was really brash to her. I said, what's wrong with you people? Why didn't you write this book? And she said, well, we tried, but we didn't get enough stories submitted. And then she said something to me that I later wrote down, and for many years I had it taped to the top of my computer where I worked. She said, try as hard as you want. You're never going to find enough ghost stories in Indiana to make a book. I hung up the phone, I looked at the phone, and I thought, let the games begin. I still didn't think I was going to write a book, you know. Heck, I just knew that my wife and I were married, still are, and we wanted children. We have a daughter. My daughter's 20 and a junior at Notre Dame. But anyway, luckily she likes ghost stories because she hears a lot of them. But I just knew that when we had kids, when she was 12, she'd want to hear some stories. I just wanted to collect a few. So I started researching and retelling some of the ghost stories in the area. And one of the first is really a classic Indiana ghost story, fairly well known, at least in Terre Haute area. Can I tell you another story? If I get boring, just throw something, okay, guys? Because I could do this all evening. Love to talk through it. Anyway, this is a really well-known story in Terre Haute, and it actually occurred in the early days of the 1900s in Terre Haute. Terre Haute was a small town then, but it was growing pretty fast. And even though there were a lot of new people in town, everybody knew and loved a guy named John Heinel. Now, John Heinel ran the only florist shop in town, and everybody knew him. He was everybody's friend. He was alone in the world. His wife had died a few years before. They never had any kids. So he was alone in the world except for all of his friends and his dog, Stiffy Green. Now, that's got to be one of the weirdest names for a dog I've ever heard. But according to the old legends, there was two reasons for the dog's name. The Stiffy part came because he was a bulldog. If you've ever seen a bulldog walk, they kind of walk stiff-legged. And the green part came, according to the legend, because unlike any dog I know I've ever seen, this dog had deep green eyes. Well, whatever the reason for the name, John Heinel and Stiffy Green were inseparable. And on warm summer evenings, John Heinel's favorite thing to do would be to fill his pipe and light it, get a walking stick and the leash and call for Stiffy Green, and they would walk the streets of Terre Haute, meeting and greeting all of his friends. Everybody knew and loved John Heinel, but nobody got too close, because they knew that Stiffy Green was very protective. As a matter of fact, it was said when John Heinel slept, Stiffy Green slept right next to him on the floor, guarding the sleep of his master. And presumably that's where Stiffy Green was when John Heinel died. He was an old man and passed away very peacefully in his sleep. Well, I've read the newspaper accounts, and it sounds like about half the town showed up to the funeral, but the chief mourner was Stiffy Green. John Heinel's friends brought the dog to the funeral, and even to his internment in the Heinel family mausoleum in Highland Lawn Cemetery in Terre Haute. They opened that iron gate of the mausoleum and slid his casket into its niche in the wall. And then they shut that iron gate with a clang. That ought to be the end of the story, but it's not.